Welcome back, everyone. New figures reveal Australians are desperate for change, largely in support of increasing our domestic oil and gas supply. As the Strait of Hormuz blockade wreaks havoc on our fuel stocks, 71% of people are now in favour of making more of it at home, with just 8% against.
The majority of Coalition and Labor voters are in favour, but more surprisingly, 57% of Greens voters also want more domestic fuel production, as do younger people also. Let's go live now to John Blackburn, Fellow at the Australian Institute of Energy. John, good morning to you. Just how practical is it to increase oil and gas production in Australia, and how would it actually work?
Look, the public's got a good point. We've been caught out, pretty unprepared for the situation we're in. And they're saying, well, hang on, we know we've got a lot of gas. Why aren't we using it? Why don't we look for more oil? And that's an important thing we need to look at. So that should be on the table as an option. That is not part of an integrated plan of what we should do. So, yes, they've got a good point. Let's go and find out what's there. What's missing in Australia, though, is that overall plan of how do all these pieces in our energy system come together, not just more stocks or just go and get a bit of oil. So there's some work we've got to do as a country to address these issues.
OK, when we ask the government this, because everyone's crying out saying, we've got all these resources, why don't we use them? When we ask the government, they say, oh, all these big mining companies handed their licences back because it wasn't worth doing business here. It was too expensive. What do you say to that?
There's cost of doing it. There's a lot of oil that comes out of the Northwest Shelf that gets exported. I understand the life of that particular source is about 7 years. The companies who were working through the Bass Strait oil reserves said, look, we're getting towards the end of it. To then go and do exploration and look at what else we could put out, there's a cost additional for doing that in Australia because our regulations, we actually pay people a decent wage. And so there's a cost prices. But here's the thing. There's a very high cost to cheap when you're in a crisis. So it is worth us considering paying that extra amount to make sure we can find more oil and gas that we can control ourselves. But that's a part of it. If we could do things with renewable, bioenergy, ethanol, renewable fuels. There's other things we could do, gas to liquids. But the question that's being raised here is a very important one. Let's go and explore it and understand it's not necessarily about the cheapest source. It's about the most resilient source, because without energy, we stop.
It seems to be, though, that we just stopped exploring, not only for oil and new gas reserves, but just a range of options because it's expensive to do business here. Those refineries didn't just shut down for no reason at all. It just became too hard. Are you saying, though, to a point, though, we're not going to become completely energy independent in this country, but we've got to look for something that would at least fill the gap, maybe 20-30% of what we're importing right now?
Okay, so right now, really, that's about 4% of our transport fuels come from Australian oil through Australian refineries. I was told in 2015 by the Department of Energy, look, they didn't care if we didn't have any refineries because it's cheaper to import refined fuel. And I went, hang on, you've really missed the point. Here's the bigger picture. What you have to do is, how do you reduce demand? Electrification is a key part of that, but that will take decades. On the supply side, how do we substitute so that we can have that reduced amount of demand there, but it allows us to have other sources. Now, that's where bioenergy, ethanol, gas to liquids, and some additional oil and capabilities there are very important, but it needs to fit into it. There's one piece that's completely missing, and the government doesn't look at it. When you've got supply and demand, you've got a logistics system that connects it. Even if we're producing all this extra stuff ourselves, if we can't have control of how it's moved around and shipped, which we don't have, then we're not going to achieve too much, because you can't move it by rail in Australia now. We're down to 2 refineries and we have no ships.
Well, that's
so you've got to look at the bigger picture,
though, isn't it? I mean, let's just try and see what we've got first, and then we'll work out the infrastructure after that. But the point of it is, we're not looking for options right now. We're not looking where there might be more oil or gas. So.
Yeah, and we haven't got the plan.
We
need a plan.
We need a plan.
We need a plan. OK, well, let's work on a plan. Sorry, John?
Right.
You know, the last time we did a national energy security assessment was 15 years ago under the Labor government. Okay. So if you're going to do a plan, you better understand your risks and vulnerabilities. Let's do one of those assessments again.
The old cost-benefit analysis that we learnt in high school economics. There you go. We might put that.
That would be practical.